If you're anything like me, you're always running out of room for your fish stuff, specifically in your sump/refugium, right? So if that is your problem, as it is mine, then I think you're going to find some value in this episode, because I'm going to show you how you can take 4 square inches of your sump, vertically of course, add this Tunze 9004 calm line skimmer to give you great skimmate production. I'm Russ Kickle, and welcome to another episode of American Reef. As always, let me set the stage, right? You get your fish tank, number one, and you think it's big enough fish tank. You put your live rock, you put your coral, you put your fish in, things start to grow, and you're like, man, I need a bigger fish tank. Same thing with your refugium and your sump. You buy that refugium, you buy all the gear, and then what happens, right, is a year or two later, there's more gear or things that you want to try, you just run out of room. Well, in my case, right, you've all seen that 110-gallon tang tank. And what I did is I decided to basically take and replace, for example, the skimmer, which was in that smaller kind of refugium sump, and I replaced it with the Miracle Mud system. And I'm really happy with that Miracle Mud system. Basically what it's done is it's prevented a lot of maintenance for me, right? And at the same time it freed up a lot of space in there. So I figured today what we would do is we'd kind of go over how the Miracle Mud worked, right? And what it looks like after, 10 months or something like that I've been using it. And then B, basically start to utilize some of that extra space that I freed up. And specifically, right, to add this little skimmer into it. And, I guess before we go into that, let me talk about my rationale as why I want to add a skimmer, because I kind of just replaced or pulled out a skimmer, a year ago just to see if that, Miracle Mud refugium filtration would work. So if I'm in your shoes, the very first thing I'm going to ask is the Miracle Mud refugium filtration system actually working? And the answer is yes, right? If we look at the tank, we can kind of see, again, great coloration, great growth. I mean, look at this money on the left-hand side. You can see the growth there, but then look on the bottom in the center here, and there's all these frags that keep on breaking off because of the big hippo tangs, for example, will take and kind of snap it off, or I'll hit it with the magnet and that sort of thing. Unfortunately or fortunately, good growth is kind of like one of these maintenance things that we just kind of got to figure out, but that's not germane to this discussion. So again, does it work? The answer is yes, right? How I have it implemented, you can kind of see here. Water flows down into the filter socks, across the ceramic media, and then from there to the Miracle Mud filtration area, that refugium, then it goes back up into the tank. And then you can kind of see I also have it forked off so that I have the bio pellets basically still doing their thing, as well as the ROX and the GFO. That's kind of that filtration in a nutshell. And then I'm also doing my 3 to 5 kind of gallon water changes daily. So when you look at it, does it work? Yes. Now, why am I going to take and add this skimmer, for example? Well, it kind of goes back to filming with Mike, right? He really believes in the Miracle Mud filtration system, right? With the one thing that he does, though, is he adds a skimmer, right, to basically increase that kind of we'll say nutrient export. And when you look at it, it makes total sense, right? Because again, in his world, he's thinking, I got to feed the fish more, etc. And so, he has found a formula that works for him. Well, in my particular case, remember when I first wanted to implement this, I just wanted to test it to see, from the Miracle Mud way, does it work? And the answer is yes, right, without a doubt. So from my end of it, though, with Mike adding, a skimmer into his sumps, I looked at it and thought, hey, I'd like to probably try that. And I'm always liking to kind of change or experiment, meaning in Mike's system, he doesn't have a biopellet reactor. Now, I know he was adding one or wanted to add one, in the future just to kind of experiment. So I want to do the opposite, meaning I want to take and add this skimmer. And what I want to do is I want to see if I can remove the biopellets by doing that. So again, like everything else, we're going to take everything gradually. So I don't want to necessarily pull the biopellets out without having something in its place. So my plans are basically to install this skimmer, right? And then from the skimmer, what I'll do is I'll slowly taper off the biopellets, and as they melt, so to speak, I'm just not going to replace them. And we're going to see basically if we can run that system, my system, right, feeding those big chunks of HPD that I always feed them, without a biopellet reactor. So now why did I select the Tunze Calmline 9004? Well, let's take a step back and let's talk about skimmers in general. So selecting a skimmer, you've always heard, man, you want to get the biggest, most efficient skimmer that you possibly can. The rationale behind that is simple. Skimmers aren't 100% efficient, meaning when you put the best skimmer in your sump, right, in your fish tank, you're not going to get 100% of the dissolved organics out of there, right? I think at best you're going to get some range between 30 and like 60 is what I heard. And again, it depends on who you believe, how they did their tests, and that sort of thing. But the key is, there's a large percentage of bad stuff still in that water column. So the idea would be bigger skimmer, you're having more skim production, you're going to get the most possible like dissolved organics out of that water column. So now, to get those high efficiency numbers though, basically there are two key factors. Ultimately you need a good skimmer, but number two, you also need a good water source. Meaning, if you look at a fish tank, bottom up, the highest concentration of those proteins, dissolved organics, is in the topmost layer of that water. I mean, when you go and you look at a fish tank, for example, that maybe hasn't been properly maintained, you'll see this kind of oily film, right, that's on the top. Well, again, that's that high concentration layer. So the idea is if you can pull that layer off, right, then again, you're going to have a good water source. And that's why you'll see kind of these coast-to-coast overflows to feed a sump. The idea is as long as you can in the tank, and you want to pull the thinnest layer possible because that's the highest concentration of, again, the dissolved organics. If you are pulling maybe instead of, a millimeter, like 10 millimeters or, whatever kind of, whatever other kind of height level that it'll dump down into the tank, you're going to basically be diluting it. So with that said, one key factor is, again, pulling or surface skimming, right? Second one is basically an efficient skimmer. Now, as far as efficient skimmers, that's probably a little bit too broad for this discussion, but let me kind of give you the gist of it. For skimmers, the idea behind it, right, is you have a bubble. Basically, that bubble will collect all the dissolved organics, goes to the top of a chamber, and then explode and exporting, over the sides, basically the dissolved organics and all the bad stuff. There's all kind of things that go into that, meaning bubble size for one, right? Hang time, number two, right? So, and this is how they kind of correlate, meaning if you have a chamber and if you have a bigger bubble, well, it's going to jack up to the top relatively quick compared to the same size chamber with a smaller bubble, right? That smaller bubble will basically take its time, right? And if you've ever seen those micro bubbles in your fish tank, you'll kind of know what I mean, meaning they'll hang around down in the water column for a long time. And while it's doing that, it's kind of gathering, right, all the dissolved organics in that water column. And so it's the same thing in your chamber where the smaller the bubble, the more efficient basically that skimmer will be. Now, you know, you've heard Mike Paletta say, for example, like when you look through a skimmer, that's why it should be that milky kind of, you know, whiteness there. Well, the reason or the rationale behind that is just that, right? Again, very, 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 very small bubbles, small as you can possibly make them. The other key there is also having bubbles the same size. Again, and it goes back to, hey, if you have a bigger bubble and it's going to go up to the chamber quicker, where it's going to basically explode, you know, at a different time than maybe one of the ones that are smaller, different sizes, right? And when they explode, you know, one will explode by like two will explode, so it'll cause this kind of cascading effect that ultimately it's not controlled, right? So when you see like these wine glass kind of skimmers where, again, it's all smooth, right? Or that they're circulating, right? The idea behind that, again, is to make sure that those bubbles basically aren't, you know, exploding down in the chamber, but they're floating down there, carrying, gathering, whatever you want to call it, you know, basically getting those dissolved organics to stick to it and then taking it up to the top, then exploding, right? So, you know, efficiency really, you know, and when you hear about hang time, things of that nature, it's really dependent on the size of the chamber as well as the bubble size. And again, as a general rule of thumb, the smaller you can go, as long as they're even, that's a good thing. So now to this Tunze 9004, when you look at it, the beauty of it is its surface skimming, right? Meaning it gets its water from the very topmost layer of your fish tank because it's going to sit there, or in your sump if you're going to put it in your sump, no matter where you put it. So again, to me, that's good, right? But that also stresses the fact that you need to make sure that your water levels are consistent, right? Higher and lower means you're going to have, you know, better or worse skimming. And that's why for me, this in a sump in the one chamber, I'm going to have a consistent height, which makes perfect sense to me, right? So I'm going to get good, basically, input to this skimmer, and this skimmer will basically take and process it. Now, from the processing side of it, when you look at this, they have something called a foamer inside there. And so inside that chamber, the bubbles are really, really, really small, right? And it gets back to, though it's a small chamber, in relationship to that bubble size, again, it's very small, so it's got enough hang time in there to actually go get, right, the, you know, absorb, I should say, actually, you know, the dissolved organics and all the bad stuff and take it up to the top and explode. So when you look at it from an efficiency standpoint, you know, again, those are probably the two main reasons why I chose this, because for its size, it did that very well. You'll see other skimmers out there that will, you know, get the water, but they won't get it from that top layer, right? They'll get it from 2 inches down, 3 inches down, or whatever, you know, wherever that pump is drawing it from. And from me, anyway, I look at it and I believe that this design here, again, if you can, you know, accommodate it in your fish tank, is much more efficient. Now, so that's the skimmate production side of it. And remember, this thing is only going to skimmate, or excuse me, it's only going to skim or handle, you know, what? At the high end, we'll say maybe, you know, 60 gallons, you know, and I put a question mark after that. But again, I've always been a huge fan of many smaller are better than one bigger, because A, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, and then B, it gives you some flexibility to manipulate things. So ultimately, my end game would be, hey, you know, if this skimmer doesn't do what I want it to, well, it's small enough that I can get 2, or I can get as many as I want. And, you know, later on here, I'll explain some other rationales behind that. But again, it affords me the ability to kind of, you know, grow into it if I need to, but yet with the one unit I got, it's very efficient. Secondly, it kind of ties into that, this thing is small, right? It's 4 square inches. So it gives me that luxury, right, of being able to put 2 in a sump, 3 in a sump, that sort of thing, if need be, and at the same time still be very price competitive. So you know, when you take all of these kind of factors and look at, you know, the other skimmers that are out there, you know, for this particular application, that's why I like this, you know, this 9004, because again, it seems like a very, very efficient skimmer. Now, with that said, I got to say, I also cheated a little bit, meaning that, you know, what I did is I took and plugged this skimmer in and I used it for about somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, a month. And I'll just throw up a quick little video here so you can kind of see. This was after the first 24 hours of production of me using that thing, right? So you look at it and it's proved itself, you know, and from my end of it, basically, you know, I had all the right thoughts going into it, and it just proved the fact that, again, as this little skimmer goes, you know, it does an excellent job at doing what it needs to do, which is skimming the gunk out of an aquarium. Okay, let's talk about the financials for a second, because I'm really a money-oriented kind of guy, right? When you look at it, one of these skimmers cost about 150-ish kind of dollars, right? If I was going to go with an in-sump skimmer for that particular tank, it would run somewhere in the neighborhood of about $400. So I look at it and say, again, you know, in-sump skimmer is going to be able to handle the whole tank. Well, okay, even if I go with 2 of these, which would be enough to handle that whole tank, I'm still making out financially, because we're talking about $300 versus $400. Now, again, that's not the main reason to do it, but again, it is a benefit. And to top it off, when you think about it, you know, we did those episodes on planning for failure, when you have power outages, right? Well, if I have a power outage, that in-sump skimmer, I can't necessarily drop that in, you know, in my main display tank without issues. Well, with these little guys, we can, right? Because there's basically magnets that hold them on into the sump. So that is like awesome, because again, we look at it, if the power goes out, I just take the magnets off, boom, put them on the side and mount it in the main display tank, and now I've got skimming when I have power outage. And one of the main reasons you can do that is because this little thing's only drawing somewhere in the neighborhood of like 4 watts, something like that, right? So when you look at that compared to like the 25 watts that you would get for, you know, one of the other kind of in-sump kind of skimmers, again, things really start to make sense going with like 2 smaller units, because again, I'm saving space, I've got options when the power failures. We know it's got the Tunze 2-year kind of warranty on it. And again, something comparable to this is going to cost $400-ish, so I'm even saving a little money. So in my mind here, things are kind of lining up thinking, you know what? This is probably a better option than that biopellet reactor, because again, when the power goes out, I've got skimming options, right? And again, with these little guys at 150 bucks, what a great kind of insurance plan, right? So when you talk about the financials and kind of some of the other, you know, other aspects of why I'm doing this, again, that's kind of my rationale behind it. And again, for me, I like to play, so again, to me, we're building a little bit better mousetrap, and we're kind of moving forward with that. Let's go over one little aspect that I really love about these skimmers. And when I open this box, it's going to jump out at you. All right, take this stuff out of the way. When you look at this skimmer, it's one of those things where, look at it, it comes set up. So that means installation, we're talking about minutes, as opposed to talking about, you know, again, some big elaborate affair. And for me, that's one of those things where, again, with power outages, with all that sort of stuff, there's some value in it for me, right? Portability, being able to move this where I want to move it. Again, that's good stuff. And again, I'm not saying, right, that we want to take and always select this kind of skimmer over maybe bigger skimmers, because bigger skimmers, they're valuable as well. But there's also value in these little skimmers that I think a lot of people just kind of go through life and then like kind of blow them off, right? And again, I just want to point that out to you. So again, rather than talk about it, let's take this bubble wrap off, let's install it, and let's see what kind of skimmate production it actually does. So now before we install this bad boy, let's take a second and talk about some things that I've changed as it relates to feeding. Now specifically it's feeding the AmericanReef's HPD, but it's very applicable to kind of any feeding in your aquarium. It all started off with one particular viewer who bought HPD, said, listen, you know, I love the HPD. Number one, it's saving me all kinds of money, right? Basically, I have to feed less because the fish are in there right? And they're eating most of it, and it's not going down into the filter, right? As well, I have cleaner water because, again, the fact that there's less waste in the water going through there, as well as less water changes, right? And I thought about it, and I replied back saying, hey man, that's really cool. But then again, as I thought about it kind of overnight and all that, I wanted to take a step back and talk about that, meaning you take HPD, for example, and the statement is true as far as when you look at it, it's a solid substance, right? It's one of those things where, less of that, waste is actually getting into that water column. However, the fish are still eating it, which means that food is still getting, into the water column. It's just going through a kind of absorption phase first, meaning the fish will eat it, right? Nutrients will be basically absorbed, but then there's wastes that still come out of that. So the fact that you're actually taking and reducing that nutrient load with whatever food, like I said, whether it's an HPD or whether it's whoever out there, it's one of those things where I don't believe that is necessarily true. I believe that the only way that you can reduce the nutrient that gets into the tank is literally by the size that you're going to feed it. Now, with that said, that particular viewer was right, meaning you can feed less of this, right, and still at the same time get their bellies full because it's so dense, right? And and along that vein, it's kind of like one of the things that I started changing, or at least telling people to do, is no matter how you're feeding, the fish, you want to make sure that obviously they're eating it and it's not hitting that water column so much, because stuff will already get in there, right? So what I've been promoting more than anything, right, has been the use of these, again, kind of feeding clips, right? And with that, with some key kind of characteristics. First of all, when you take and use a mesh bag, first of all, but second of all, close the sides off. Because when you're closing those sides, again, it's less for the big chunks to get away and they have to pick at it, which is a really good thing. Again, when you're using the clip itself, a lot of people will have, those kind of, I guess, like the Ocean Nutrition kind of clips, which they don't bite it hard enough when you're using these kind of mesh bags, so the bags will fall down. It becomes kind of a nuisance, right? So if you use one of these deluxe kind of clips where you can jam it on, right, it will take and basically save you that aggravation. Lastly, this little kind of hanger. So what I've been doing is I've been creating these little hangers, so that way from a feeding standpoint, right, I don't have to get my hands wet and that sort of thing. Meaning I just kind of drop it in, right, and pull another one out. Right? Tap it off, go from there. Now, with that in mind, that does two things for me. The first thing that it does is it makes it easy. I'm running late for work in the morning, that sort of thing. I'll just take and have one clip ready, put it in. Second thing, it's going to allow me to have less contact with the water. Meaning, recently we've heard about a lot of, tank crashes and things of that nature that, will happen to everybody. And when you look at it, one of the reasons why you can get those kind of tank crashes is because you're not cleaning your hands good enough, right? They're dirty, or there's something on their soaps, whatever, some kind of contaminant. So for me, I'm always trying to minimize the amount of contact time, basically, that my hands will have with the water. So by having one of these like this, I'm still touching this, sure, but I'm not putting my hands in the tank. So like in the morning kind of thing, I'll just take this clip out, right? Open my little bag up. I'll take a little HPD, right? Take it like that. Again, I'll touch the food with a knife, right? As opposed to having to literally touch it with my hands. Again, since it's dense, put it in a bag like that. Ultimately, again, you put your food clip on it. Now, again, they can't pull it off, right? You can't get it to it from the sides. And then, like I said, I'll just take and drop this out like that, give it a couple taps, put the new one in here, hang it on the side, right? And then I'm just walking away from it. And then I'll take this clip here, and I'll actually take and, put it on the side, let it dry out kind of thing. Now, the bad part about that whole kind of scenario is, like you can see over here, this you know, the fish go after the HPD, which is really kind of a cool thing. But man, that Montipora over here, you'll see all those frags, and you know, you'll have beautiful kind of you know, shelves that will be created, and these big fish will just kind of crack it and knock it off. So it's one of those things where, like, when you use one of these hangers, it's a real good idea to put it somewhere where, again, from a coral end of it, you know, when you have like larger fish like this, you know, you have less destruction. So with that being said, again, just some things that I've kind of picked up along the way that I wanted to share with you regarding feeding. And again, whether it's feeding HPD or any food, right? Whether that's nori or anything that you put in your tank, I really believe that, again, those kind of germane across to all feedings. There we go. Okay, so I had to clean that off, and unfortunately, right, one of the problems you get, it's a good problem to have when you have a healthy fish tank, is you get this coralline algae down there, right? It's a sign of, you know, again, things are going good in your fish tank. And unfortunately, I had a lot of coralline algae down here, so, you know, in the end, you couldn't see the miracle mud and that sort of stuff, because I wanted to give you a quick update there. Again, miracle mud, like I said, really like it a lot. As far as the trays, what I did end up doing is I added a total of 4 trays by the time I was done. You kind of see them there. You'll see them in the back here. As far as changing it, like I said, what you want to do is you want to change that miracle mud every 6-ish months, right? You want to take half of it and basically replace it. Now, as far as the other things that you haven't seen for a while, again, basically the ceramic balls. Again, I really like those. I guess they're called Marine Pure. Doing a real good job over there. And again, you can kind of see where water comes down across that biological filtration, so to speak, that bacteria, right? It's going to come over here into the refugium, and then it's going to come up. And in this bad boy over here, right, basically the biopallets, this right here is what I want to eliminate. I guess for a couple reasons. Number one, I like to experiment and play around, so I just want to do that. Remember, one of the tests that I did do is I said, listen, there is no skimmer in here, so what kind of side effects do I have for running, you know, just the biopallets without a skimmer? And at the end of the day, you kind of see the tank, right? It's still looking good. So I haven't had any issues with that. And again, it might be a long-term kind of thing where you might see issues coming up later on down the road, meaning after a year, 2 years, 3 years, not exactly sure. For me, I just wanted to test that out to see if there would be an issue. And so there wasn't, right? And ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece out of it, right? And this is the chamber where that skimmer is going to go. And if I go over here and get that skimmer, remember I was talking about height, right, as far as where it would fit. Basically, you can kind of see here where, again, water level here, it's going to go down, so it fits perfectly in this chamber over here. Very small section. And again, with this particular filter, that's why I like it, because it's going to be simple and easy to get in, to get out, to clean. Again, it'll be right here. Even though we know, like, for me, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to originally try the just plain refugium, is just to see if it would work without the skimmer, and the answer is yes, it does. Like everything else, the more you feed, the more nutrient export you're going to need, so why not experiment a little bit? And with that said here, rather than put it into this chamber, there's a little spot right back in this back corner, right, that I kind of freed up. So what I'm going to do is that's going to be the final resting place. But before we put it back there, what I did want to do is I just wanted to install it on this main display so you can kind of see how simple and how easy it is to actually install. Again, as a reminder, before you even attempt to put it in the tank, make sure you rinse it off with hot water. And when you do it, it's probably a good idea to kind of open it up. And again, when you're opening up this particular unit, you'll notice there are basically 3 kind of male-female tabs on each side, right? And what you want to do is basically take the lid, you squeeze a little bit on, when I say lid, I mean kind of that front panel. You take a little bit and you squeeze there, and then you'll notice it'll pop out. And it will actually have two components. You'll have this front-facing panel, with those 3 tabs. Then you kind of have the insides, or these, where the brains of it, so to speak. It's real simple. You have this pump drawing the air and your power, and then you can kind of see the inside of what's going on as well. So again, you want to make sure you clean it out real good, and then again, what we're going to want to do is make sure that we clean it periodically. But just because, crud builds up, salt water is very corrosive. Now, putting it back together, there's a little trick as well. You'll notice basically on this inside panel, there are these little grooves. Well, if you take that front-facing panel and basically take this internal panel and slide that empty slot into that groove, it'll fit real tight like that, and now you kind of have the 2 pieces. And then you'll also notice you'll also have that channel right on the inside of here. Right? As you can see that channel there. All you do is you take this particular plastic part, you're going to put it into that channel on the left side, then you'll take it on the right side, and you'll notice it just kind of snaps together like so. And then from there, we're just going to click it in place. Remember, this is plastic, so again, we don't want to put a lot of pressure onto it. I mean, like you see something like that, if it's not going in, just squeeze the top just a little bit, right? You want to finesse it in, right? You don't want to necessarily cram it in because you want to break anything, right? So now for the really tough part, right? The installation. Now remember, its final resting place is actually going to be down in that sump. But again, for now, I think I can get better kind of video of it up here, so you can kind of see like the foamer kind of production, that sort of thing. But again, all we're going to do is after you rinse it out, take, find a location. Let's just take the magnet here and put that magnet on. Got another magnet here. Go from there. Just pull that muffler through. Now we have our cup, right? Place the cup on, and we're done. It's that simple. So you can kind of see where I was getting at as far as power outages, right? When you have a power outage, things of that nature. Well, this is going to be a simple little kind of stopgap measure until you kind of get the power back on, that you can kind of skim this tank again, and it's only drawing 4 watts. So again, it's not meant to be kind of like the be-all end-all. Like for me, in my tank, I am using it more as a supplement, right, to my filtration system. But again, if the power goes out, I like to have this, this option handy. One thing to keep in mind, like if you're doing it like in my case, like for example, this is going in my sump, but there's no ledges or edges in a sump. Well, in here you can kind of see up here, there's a little ledge. Well, in order to adjust the skimmer higher, we'll say, or lower, you want to make sure that edge is not interfering with you. So what happens is they give you basically kind of extensions that will take the actual skimmer itself and push it out. So it'll give you the ability to raise it higher and lower. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is you might think you might not have a use for it when you're kind of doing it in your sump or something like that. But consider if you want the option to move it up and down, and whatever your tank you're putting into it has a ledge, you want to make sure you keep those kind of extenders handy to give you that flexibility. So for those of you who have seen skimmers before, it works on the same principle. I mean, it's going to skim that kind of protein-rich water off the top. It's going to take it down through inside the chamber. It's going to mix it up, and all those bad little things are going to stick onto the air bubbles, and in turn, they're going to come out of this chamber. And again, a couple little features on this cup that I like. You'll see this groove right back here. And again, as far as opening that lid, that little groove kind of really helps you there. Also, you'll notice inside this cup how it kind of tapers up to the top. Right? And so it follows that same general design principle that we've seen like in cone skimmers and those kind of skimmers where, again, you have a big body and it kind of gradually tapers up. And it also does that inside the chamber as well, as you may have noticed when we were kind of cleaning it out. So installation-wise, you kind of get the idea. Let's plug it in. Again, 2-prong plug. Plug it in there, and we'll start to see the foam kind of rise up through that internal chamber. Remember, on this particular unit, to get that foam higher or lower, what you're going to want to do is raise the skimmer higher or lower, right? If you put it lower, that means actually you're going to have more volume, so the foam's going to be higher in the unit, and then vice versa. And you'll actually see there's a recommended line as well, and you can adjust it according to your desire. Remember, what you want to kind of get out of there is a really dark tea looking skim mate. You know, again, you'll have different philosophies. Some people will tell you, again, that darker is better. Others say, you know, again, kind of a very light tea light is better. And to me, that's one of the things where if I do go with two, I'm going to set one at a very dark skim mate production. I'm going to set the other one at a very light skim mate production to kind of get the both. My guess is I'm not going to need two, but, you know, I'm only going to probably need one skimmer. But that being said, you know, it's an option. All right, we look at it again. Down here where the micro bubbles will be coming out, very minimal. And to me that's important because I don't like on a fish tank, for example, when you have the micro bubbles in the tank, they'll bust and they'll get all over the lights. And again, for me, I keep my lights really close here. So it's one of those things where I don't want to have to clean them, right? And so that looks good. You can kind of see from just a general skim mate foaming kind of production, it's doing a pretty decent job. But again, remember, all skimmers have a break-in period of a few weeks. So what we're going to do is, now that you've kind of seen what it looks like up here, it's easy to video, etc. What I am going to do is I'm going to move it back down to the sump where I intended to go for probably, my guess will be about like 2 months, 3 months, until, like I said, the biopellets are actually dissolved. And then when I actually remove that biopellet reactor, I'll move it into that chamber. So installation-wise, it's relatively simple. We're going to remove the light. Speaking of which, the last time you probably saw this light was a compact fluorescent. I didn't like it that much. Like I said, I had it kind of laying around. So what I ended up getting is a waterproof one. I know Tunze has one. This one here, it was a cheap light. I believe under 50 bucks, like at Petco, something like that. It's not necessarily a ton of light, but again, for the Miracle Mud kind of refugium, it's worked fine, right? Again, waterproof, so if you dump it in, hey, no big deal. So to that point, let's take and remove the light. I have a rock back here that I'm going to need to remove. Let's get this out of the way. Go. And installation wise, grab my magnet, grab my skimmer, attach them up on top, and then adjust the height from there. And again, I know where that line is that they gave us, so I'm going to take it now and just move it down a little bit. It's about halfway. Go. Let's put the cup on. And then again, it's important for this muffler, we want to make sure it's out of the water because that's where it's going to get its air. Move that down a little bit. Just put our light back. And for now, we'll plug it in. See what we got. And for me, again, what I like to do is from a foam kind of production, I like to keep it relatively low, meaning the lower I keep it, like a darker kind of tea is going to show up. So for me on this one, I'm going to experiment a little bit, but most likely I'm going to keep it nice and low towards the bottom. Actually, that one there is probably about where I want to keep it for now. And so the idea for here anyway will be, let's just set it and forget it kind of thing. Let it in here for, again, a couple weeks. I'm going to let it break in, and then after that I'll kind of adjust it accordingly. But in general, you can see why I really like the idea here, meaning it's a simple, small, little skimmer that will be able to really help supplement not only the filtration in here, allowing me to remove this, again, biopellet reactor, but also, I got a power outage, something like that. Man, I just take, bam, slap it up on top. I'm cooking with gas. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours since I filmed that last segment. What I wanted to do basically is, clean up, and I did some odds and ends around the house, but I wanted to show basically how, 2 hours later, and actually it's been way more than 2 hours, how the HPD looks and how it works. And the key there, again, when you buy a food, right, you want to make sure you get a food that's going to go in the fish as opposed to into a water column behind a rock and just cause a nutrient issue, which will cause, again, algae outbreaks, cloudy water, and the list goes on, fish diseases, things of that nature, right? We want to have clean, pure water there. And again, you can see how a food like this does that. Again, it doesn't matter the food, right? You can actually go and do nori. Nori is a great option. Again, you can shove down in there and they can pick at it all day, right? But whatever food you choose, make sure you kind of feed it that way, so that way it's going in their bellies as opposed to landing up in the column. And again, if it is in that water column, that's why we need our filtration, right? That's why, I decided to add that Tunze 9004 on there. And you can kind of see how that works, right? Meaning that filtration now, it's working good, and from that point there, I want to kind of pour out those biopellet reactors. So hey, we gotta, we have to substitute for something, right? Because we have to have that nutrient control. And with that little skimmer, you can kind of see how it will do that. And again, it's only rated for like 40 to 60 gallons, but heck, I already got so much other filtration there, it should work fine. And if not, then I buy another one because they're relatively inexpensive. And so I do that, but yet I still have that full room right down in the Sump and refugium area so that I can have the copepods, amphipods, things of that nature that will, again, feed these fish, which will make them healthy. So again, one of the reasons why I do this kind of stuff is so I, as an experienced hobbyist, right, will make some of the mistakes so you don't have to, but I'll do them in a way that they're recoverable, right? I'll do it over time, right? And again, same with everything we do in this hobby, as you heard Mike Paletta say, nothing good happens fast, right, in an aquarium, so we want to take our time. So now, besides all the benefits you get from a filtration side of it, right, we've got all the benefits of being able to skim this, this particular fish tank when there's a power outage. Now, I have a battery, power supply to this, for example, but with that battery power supply, I can't draw tons, of wattage coming out. And at 4 watts, this is a great option for that. So again, when you have a bad thing, right, like a power outage that's going to last day, 2, whatever that is, having some sort of backup plan like this is, again, to me, one of those things where, it's something we need to do, right? Not only as far as being responsible, but 2, you want to do because you got an investment in this tank, right? Like you look at any one of those corals, for example, in there, and we're talking $300-400 north of that, actually. So at a skimmer that's about 150 bucks, it's a great insurance policy, right? Again, it goes back to my tagline as far as that intelligent consumption, right? Meaning that we do want to purchase things, right? But we only want to purchase something that we are going to use, right, and get value out of. And speaking of value, right, if you're going to buy a 9004, for example, buy it from one of my sponsors, Bulk Reef Supply, Premium Aquatics. Again, they're all good guys, honest guys that I believe that this industry needs because, as most industries, right, they're driven by dollars, right? But again, with my sponsors, it's one of those things, one of the reasons why I chose them is they care about your success first, right? Again, they're in it to make money. They are a business, but more importantly, they want you to be successful. So a lot of the things that they stock, right, the advice that they give, right, it's one of those things where, again, they do that first so you can succeed. Because think about it, if you're in business, you want somebody to have an aquarium so they can continue to buy stuff, right? So it's kind of one of these circles that, everybody wins, and you'll be happy with the service, and they'll be happy because you'll be giving them the service. So again, if you're looking for a Tunze, support my sponsors. Again, filtration-wise, again, Tunze is a great product manufacturer, and they've got products under the sun. Again, you can see by the look of this particular unit and basically how I'm going to use it in here. There's a ton of value in there. Same with the Miracle Mud, right? The Ecosystem Miracle Mud filtration. And again, it's a great system that, again, it just works, which is nice. It's something you can rely on. you know, it goes for the food as well, right? From a food standpoint, if you're looking for a high quality marine food, right, try the American Reef HPD out. Not only do you get a good food that kind of, you know, I've explained all the characteristics of why you want that kind of food, but also it helps support American Reef. It also keeps these videos coming, right? And why do you want to do that? Again, it's simple. You know, I make the mistakes so you don't have to, so the money that you spend basically goes to something you're going to enjoy, as opposed to having a pile of products that you don't use, fish that die, you know, the list goes on, right? And again, where can you find the American Reef HPD? Out at AmericanReef.com. I put a little PayPal button down at the bottom. It says a buy now kind of thing. And you know, you can get the clips as well as anything else you saw here. I even have nori, but just give me an email. I can give you a price on that nori, depending on how much you need, that sort of thing. So again, when you look at it, you know, the idea is here we want to support people in this hobby who deserve being supported, and my sponsors actually fall into that category. So with that said, again, I hope you found a ton of value in here and in turn support me. But if not, that's okay, because probably in about a week or so you'll see another video coming out from AmericanReef.com, because I'm here to help you succeed as well. Again, thanks for watching. Stay tuned until next time.